Hi, I'm David. I'm an occupational therapist working in Exeter and I work with Jackie. I'll be demonstrating some splints. This splint would be very useful if there was a skin graft on it. It's also quite useful if there's just swelling or inflammation from other trauma or an infection in the foot. It can also be used, adapted, for injuries to the extensor tendons on the front surface of the foot, where putting the foot into this position offloads those tendons, takes the tension off and allows them to heal. So if you had a skin graft on the front of your foot, so somewhere around here, what we would want to do is to stop the ankle moving so much that that skin graft was exercised or irritated off the front of your leg. So to do that, what I'm going to do is make a splint underneath the leg which holds the ankle up at 90 degrees like that, and will stop the ankle moving around. Now the plastic that I'm going to use is called Exolite, and it's very useful because it is light and it is ventilated, especially over a wound. One thing it doesn't do very well though is weight bear on it, so you have to be careful not to put too much weight on it because the material will crack. The way to start with this is take some basic measurements so that I know how much material I'm going to need, and I'm just going to get a rough idea. So I'm just going to measure up underneath and just to the end. So that is 69, I call it 70, about 70 centimetres. Now the funny stuff with this material is that it shrinks a little bit, and if you're making splints for arms and hands it doesn't really matter, but once you get over something which is about 50 centimetres, 40 centimetres long, then it does matter, and what I usually do is add about 10%. So if I measured at about 70, I'm going to cut out about 77 centimetres in length. This is the material, and I'm just going to cut 77 centimetres, which is about that long. It's a very versatile material, very good in when the weather is warm, which doesn't happen in this country very often, but might in yours. I'm going to make this splint using a double layer, merely for the strength. So I'm going to just cut another one to the same length. Usually 2 layers for a leg with some reinforcement. You'll probably find that most of the splints we use this material for, it's done in a double layer. Just dip the end, just to hold it together, just to keep it in control. Now the splint is going to start up here, probably on the widest part, probably about 17, 18 centimetres there. It's going to go at the ankle, 17. Doesn't matter whether I measure underneath the foot or on the top. I'm going for about 13, so 13, 17, 18. My material is 20 centimetres wide, so that's ideal for the widest part of the foot. At the end we're up somewhere around 13, so I want to aim for something about that wide. And now I'm afraid I just make it up. So I want a pattern which is going to be 18 centimetres at that end, 13 there, and where the ankle will be about 17. If you find it hard to cut this material, because it's quite tough when it's a couple of layers thick, you can also cook it up first, get it soft and cut it soft. And now by squeezing them together or using a rolling pin, which can also help, you can bond those sheets fairly firmly together. It now doesn't want to separate. I would have a bowl, sort of laundry style as to say, put a couple of inches of really hot water in it and then dip it in and fold it over onto itself and then pull it out. If you don't push it together, you can separate the layers quite easily. And if they are getting a bit sticky, sometimes if you have sort of paper tissues or towels, you can put that between the layers as well, and that stops it from sticking in very hot water. And if it gets stuck to the plastic, when it next goes in, the paper floats off the top. I'm going to round out the corners at the top. I'm just going to heat that bit. With this material, the downside of it is the edges are a bit rough. We always fold over the edges. It's better to fold them over onto the the underneath side, the side that is away from the patient. That is a smooth edge compared to that, which is quite rough. Foot is about that long, ankle is about there. It gets a bit narrower above the ankle, so I'm making a bigger turnover there and bringing that up towards the top of the leg. And on the other side, again, making a slightly bigger turnover to make that bit of splint narrower. Heating up the rest of it and just finish off the same thing, just rounding out. Wonderful. And then to really bond those edges down and make sure they don't come undone when the plastic is reheated, I roll it with a rolling pin. Leftovers, let's not waste them, so they go back in. So you've got to think yourself, where in this splint is it going to be weakest? Well, it's going to be where the ankle is, which is sort of around here. We've already reinforced it with this slightly wider turnover, but as I've got some bits left over, I can use those to reinforce that bit. If you're artistic, you can make pretty patterns. But all those bits are now put to use. And again, just push them well in so that they get stuck on. It's about 13 down at this end. It's going to be about 17 when it gets to the ankle, and then as the leg goes up it gets thinner, and then we've got about 18 odd at the top. It actually worked. Now let's see what the length is. This has only been in the splint bath a little, and we're down to 72 centimetres, and that started off at 77, and I'm sure by the time I've cooked it a final time before it's actually applied, we're going to lose another couple of centimetres. So it always seems a bit much, but if you don't add 10% for the hot water, you'll end up with not enough plastic. Water everywhere. It's in the cupboard, it's in the spare towels. Good grief. So as you see, I've folded it over to get it all in the water bath, and that will come off relatively easily. Ugh. Just make sure all the edges are down. Now if you have a heat gun, you can put the Velcro on later, and that's probably the easiest way to do it, because you know exactly where you're putting the Velcro. But at this stage, if you want to, and if you know where the Velcro is going to be, so probably the third or fourth one you've made, you can put the Velcro direct to the plastic now. And I would use fairly large bits for the kind of strapping that we use. I usually take the corners off, and then it's less likely to peel off inadvertently when it's on. And then just peeling them off and putting them straight on, you don't have to worry about heating the back of the Velcro or anything, because we'll give it another cook. So I'll put those on because I know I'll need one there. There we go. They're on now, and they'll be on for good. They'll stay on nicely. Right, cook that. Now it's time to put it on the patient. I've got a towel to catch any drips, and I've got a standard crepe bandage which I've just wetted, which is useful as a second pair of hands to hold the splint onto the leg. Let's prove a point. 69. Wonderful. So it's lost its 10%. And here we go. Right, it's a big thing. It's useful if you have friends at this stage and a very cooperative patient. I'm just laying it back to get the right length, and then I'll draw it up and try and get it to stick to the stockinette. And then when you get to this part at the ankle, squeeze it together to make little dog ears. And then this can be used just to hold it on a little more, just as an extra pair of hands. And by being wet, one, doesn't stick to the plastic, and two, it cools it down a little bit. It's important to stop getting any creases underneath, because any crease in the towel will be transferred to the splint. And then you can now if you needed to lean and work against any tension, you could put some force on that. Those will be folded back. I'd always do it later. I don't try and do it while I'm making the splint, because you'll get a much better result. And at this point, you can fan it. And we've got one. Here is one we used earlier. It's like watching paint dry. This is watching plastic cool. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to cool off, and it needs supporting through that time. Time passes. 3 or 4 minutes later, this has now gone hard, and I can unwrap it, and it won't have stuck to the splint. I'll get a pair of scissors. Patient can remove foot. So, splint is now finished. The lining can be stripped out. This is the time when I do the dog ears. What works really well for this is a large syringe, and by holding the splint so that the bits that you want to keep formed out of the water, and just that dog ear is in the water, and then just put a bit of hot water also in there. Now again, if you haven't got a bowl big enough to get the whole thing this close to the water, you would have to do it probably with a syringe by basting it, and enough to heat up that plastic until it's soft, and then that can be folded back. Doesn't matter whether it folds forward or back. The inside needs to make sure you don't leave a big dent on the inside, so keep that layer smooth. You can then run cold water over that to set it. And then the other one. And I'm just pushing those together so that they form a strong section just where the splint needs to be strong. And again, just cool that off. Occasionally, you can catch it before it's gone off, and you just leave a little dent in the side of the splint like that. And if that happens, then you just need to cook that bit again in the hot water, just for a couple of minutes, just to soften it, and then mould it again by hand until it's smooth. And then that can again be set under a cold tap to set the plastic and stop it being deformed again. So that's it. It's got lots of water in it, which you have to flick out. These were the Velcro that we put on earlier, and you can see that it's on. It's not going to come off in a hurry. If we need to put some more on, then I would suggest with a splint like this, it can be held at the top, and then maybe a strap that crosses over at the ankle, which can be a single continuous piece all the way around. This is one strap which we could put on here to the Velcro that we've already fitted. This stuff is quite nice and soft and foamy, but you can just use straightforward Velcro and maybe with some padding sewn to it. And what I like to do here is do a single strap which crosses over at the ankle like that, and then with the ankle controlled, that would work very nicely to hold the splint on the foot, right up to the point where you have a graft there. And if you have a graft there, then you might not want to put a strap directly over it, and you might want to put a strap there and maybe just above the graft there. So the placement of the strap depends on the condition that you're treating. I'm lining it up and I'm just looking at it, or if I had a pen, I could mark the splint where I'm going to put the strap. Patient can remove foot. To fit Velcro to X-Lite once it's cold, you need a hot air gun. Some Velcro, I'm going to put a big pad across the foot, and then 2 smaller pieces either side. So with the heat gun going, the plastic needs to be directly heated until the surface gets quite sticky. And that needs to be done right onto the heat, as close as you can. And then once it's a bit sticky, then the Velcro, just the sticky side, is also heated. And then they stick together once they've cooled. And lastly, the one underneath, just about see the pencil line across there. And then push it well down and allow it to cool before you try and put any strapping on it or more to a point, take any off, because while it's still hot, you can peel it off relatively easily. So it needs to cool down. So once that has cooled, you can be lined with some soft wadding. Which is alive. Bearing particular attention to the malleoli, which are the other bony prominences, so back of the heel, which might otherwise produce a sore spot on the splint. Let's fit that. And then this one goes like that. Ta-da!